Hello and welcome to Stop Being Polite, the new podcast brought to you by Silent Podcasts, where we are anything but silent, where we will be covering all things real world New Orleans. So you may have caught us on Wednesday when we recapped the first episode of Real World New Orleans Homecoming, but we're doing things a little bit differently today, and we're going to recap the original season for you. And I am here with my co-host, Kari. Kari, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm living the podcasting dream, which is doing multiple podcasts with you on a Saturday afternoon.
Yes, we are in a marathon.
Yes, we're here and we are crushing it. So I
Yes.
am good. And how are you, Katie?
I am good. I'm excited to talk about this season. We kind of crushed it over the last week and a half or so. So we're excited to go back in time to the year 2000, Y2K, and talk about all things from the pre 9/11 world, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Yes, especially, oh my God, not to jump to the end, but when not Melissa, I'm sorry, when Julie was just skateboarding through the airport in the final scene, I'm like,
Yes, the airport scenes
wow.
really were jarring to me because it was just so different, so different. But yeah, you can really tell some of this. Some of the stuff seems like exactly the same as it would be now, and then some of the things like the time difference, the time difference meaning like the year difference is really apparent, and that is one of them.
Yes, especially just there's no way that happens now.
No way at all. No, no way at all.
Absolutely none. Can
No,
you even bring a skateboard through TSA?
I don't know. I feel like you'd have to check it.
Yeah, I would think
Maybe
so
I don't
too.
know. I'm not sure. I'm afraid of flying, so I don't really know all the rules. I mean, I do it if I have to, but I'm afraid of it. Okay, so talking just to cover off on the format today, we're gonna go through each. We talked about this a little bit. Do you want to break it up into chunks? Do you want to do it all at once? So I think we decided on the best format right now is to cover off on each cast member, talk about their journey through the series a little bit, and their main plot points, some of the things that we think will probably carry into Homecoming, and then just kind of cover off on anything else that we may have missed in the character journey, or house guest journey, I guess we can say. And then the only other quick housekeeping note that we wanted to mention at the top is that David now goes by Tokyo. So we talked a little bit on how do we want to cover this? Do we want to call him David because he went by David back then? But we want to be respectful of what Tokyo's wishes are now, and he wishes to go by Tokyo. He's going to legally change his name to that soon. So we're just gonna keep it nice and easy and call him Tokyo throughout this podcast. So anytime we're talking about Tokyo, we're referring to David. Anytime we're talking about David, we will be calling him Tokyo. So just wanted to cover that off on the top. If you have any questions about it, that's why. Should we jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, I'm going to go through everybody on the list just in the order that they're in on the Wikipedia page, just to make it easy,
Okay.
so we don't forget anybody. So we will, no particular order. It doesn't seem like they're in alphabetical order or anything, so they just randomly put them here. So let's start with Jamie. So Jamie, at the time that he was in the house, was 22. He's from Illinois. We can actually read his biography as I have it listed here on the Wikipedia page. He is described by MTV as cocky, confident, and astoundingly ambitious. He's a web entrepreneur and an Ayn Rand fan, which I think is kind of a taboo these days, who likes spending time with his male friends but hopes to get married one day. Melissa developed a crush on him and flirted with him during the series, though he does not return the feelings beyond friendship. After the show, he appeared on more than one season of the spinoff Real World Road Rules Challenge.
Yes, where I believe he was pretty successful. He has one of the highest winning rates of all time.
Yes. Yeah. So shout out to Jamie. Good for you. Good for you. What are your initial thoughts on Jamie? Any top line takeaways? Anything deeper? I mean, Jamie feels like one of the housemates that was a really big part of the show, but also kind of didn't give us a lot in terms of personality.
He was a great supporting character in the entire experience, but very little revolved around Jamie being the main character of the situation, I felt like.
Yeah.
However,
he had oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say, however, I kind of expect that from, I think, him filling the frat boy character in this house. He's the white, good-looking party boy.
Yep.
And so I don't really think that we were expecting too much depth from him. I think we got more depth from him than anticipated.
Yeah, I
However,
totally agree.
I didn't really have high hopes or expectations.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like Jamie's archetype is very like the hot guy of the house that all the girls have a crush on, and they kind of did in the beginning. So it started with Melissa and Kelly. Kelly had a crush on him too at the beginning, but then it ended up that their relationship didn't really go anywhere. They actually kind of were at odds toward the back half of the season. They didn't really get along too well. And then Julie kind of had a little bit of we can call it an entanglement with Jamie throughout the sort of like middle back half of the season. They had a very like sexual tension filled relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And Jamie seemed to kind of like reciprocate with Julie at some points.
Yeah, I didn't think that it was like one more than the other. It
Yeah.
just felt very. It was kind of surprising, I think, because both Kelly and Melissa were shooting their shot, and I think that might just be like my perspective of Julie is very much tainted because my experience with Julie before watching this is watching her trying to murder Veronica on the challenge. So, like knowing that first and then just seeing the way that almost every single housemate like kind of fawned over her in a way at one point or another. It was just like, whoa, okay, Jamie, like you can pull anybody, and Julie is where you're finding this like, or it's so strong of an attraction you're acting on it. That was very surprising to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. There was an episode where Julie made a mud pit and they wrestled with each other. And Melissa stood on the porch and was like, "This is getting sexual." And then they ended up kissing at the bottom of the stairs at the end of the episode. I don't think it ever went any further, at least as far as we understand, it never went any further than that. But I think you're right. Like he could definitely pull anybody, and he made it clear throughout the show that he's like not interested in a relationship. He's all about his boys. Like, why would he distract himself with a relationship? He's young. And that was like his main kind of like storyline, I feel like, throughout the season.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like Julie, he kind of knew maybe subconsciously that he or she probably wouldn't cross the line with him to make it more than just like this fun, flirty thing. So it was more
Mm-hmm.
safe for him. Whereas Melissa, I think, was a true, genuine connection. And he just never really reciprocated. Like, yeah, she had a crush on him, but they also had a really good personal relationship too.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, she probably maybe at the time wanted a little bit more than that. And he just was not willing to even give in. And Kelly, I think, just thought he was probably hot. I thought Jamie was hot back then too, to be fair.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely was an attractive person. There's no taking anything away from that.
Yeah.
And I think you bring up a really good point of like, Julie wasn't going to sleep with him. There's no way Julie was sleeping with anyone during her time on The Real World, because I think that would have crossed too many lines for her personally within the Mormon religion, despite how like conflicted she was with it. So it kind of was like a safe little, I know it's never going to pass this boundary. So
Right.
that makes some sense when you phrase it that way.
Yeah, and I think so. What else can we really say about Jamie? I think, you know, throughout the show, thinking about when they, so their job, I guess we could say this more holistically rather than kind of like housemate or roommate specific, but their job was to produce a TV show for public access television down in New Orleans. They decided to name it The Real Seven, and each roommate had their own episode that they were producing. So he produced, I don't even really remember what he was producing, an art show. People came on to talk
It
about
was
art or
about
music,
music. It was
music,
so they had just
jazz
gotten back
musicians.
from their trip to South Africa, which I
Mhm.
wonder if that kind of like inspired this, but the history and development of Black music, um, which I thought was just like an interesting choice. But I also don't think that in 2000 people were as openly critical of like white
Mhm.
people making choices that
Right.
are like interfering in spaces that aren't theirs
Yeah.
as we are now
Agreed.
in 2022. Like I think if this is the same group at the same age right now, there's no way Tokyo isn't like, excuse me, what? Or
Yeah.
Melissa
Or
being like,
Melissa.
excuse me,
Yeah.
what? You are doing the episode on the development of Black
Yeah.
music? Okay, so
Exactly. Exactly. But that show I think was a disaster.
yeah, it was one of their worst
He
ones.
didn't prep anybody for the material. He didn't prep his guests on what would be talked about, and just kind of left them to, get fed to the wolves of the proverbial wolves, I guess, because who did the interview? It was Matt and Kelly, and I wouldn't necessarily say that they're wolves, but it just went really, really poorly. And he did not take the criticism from Elton well, which, by the way, shout out to Elton. I am an Elton stan. I don't know if you appreciate Elton as much as I do, but I feel like he was a serious like business person who was trying to mentor these people, and like he pushed them when they needed to be pushed, but gave them good criticism when they or good praise or positive praise when they needed it. And I just feel like he was a really good boss. Like I would love to have Elton as my boss, even if he's kind of a dick sometimes. I think like he did it for good reason. And they wouldn't have taken him seriously if he was any other way.
Oh, 100%. Like the hardest age range, in my opinion, to wrangle in terms of employees, having either been as someone who has taught teenagers, who has like ran a summer camp, so your employees are anywhere between like 19 and 24, and then been the colleagues of
Mm-hmm.
adults. Like I'll say adults are older than that, right? We'll
Yeah.
say like 25 plus. Is that like 19 to 24 age?
Yeah.
Because they think like they're old enough to know, but they don't realize that they're not old enough to like know better yet.
Yep.
And it's dealing with that is far too much. It's just a lot. So, um, yeah, in conclusion, I appreciate everything that he brought. I thought he did such a good job. Nitro was backing me up on this.
Yeah. Nitro, big Elton fan.
He watched a lot of Real World with me over the last week. So I definitely agree that he did the best he could with the 7 people he was given.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Elton did a really good job. And I think you're totally right about the age range. At having previously been in my early 20s, a very long time ago, I feel like at that age, it's like you feel like you know a lot more things than you actually know, or you feel like you should be treated like you're a full on functioning adult, which, like, in some cases, people that age are. But it just
Mm-hmm.
strikes me. I don't know if you watched The Ultimatum. This is a veer
Not
off to
yet.
the
It's on
left
my list.
direction. Well,
I.
everybody on that show is like early 20s,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, I'm ready to get married and have babies right now. And I'm like, you're 23. What are we doing here? And that's kind of like how I feel about some of the people in the real world where they acted like they were maybe a little like ready for a little bit more in their lives than they should have been. Like you're young. You should be able to like hang out and just not have a lot of responsibility, which I feel like they didn't really want a lot of responsibility. So Elton did a good job with them. And
I'm
it warmed
going.
my heart with him when he gave them, positive feedback.
Yeah, he definitely like. It's good that he didn't hold back on the positive and he wasn't just like a dick the whole time.
Yeah.
I'm bringing in a user comment, not user, viewer. Sorry, I'm trying to like trick my dog into not barking and while talk at the same time, and like neither going well clearly. Um, so Valencia said like I remember the show, but I forgot that they had a job. Not only did they have a
Yeah.
job, and like not to jump off of this character too quickly, but
Yeah.
both Tokyo and Danny bartended on the side as well.
Yes. Yes, they
So
did. That's
there's
right.
people who had multiple jobs
Yeah.
throughout their stay in New Orleans, but their one together was
Mhm.
their public
Producing the
access
real
show.
7.
Which also like throwing 7 people into producing a TV show who have never done it, like you're asking for it to be bad sometimes.
Yeah, and also 7 people who live together and then have to work together, which is like and who don't know each other. They are 7 strangers, so as they say in the opening. So it's just an interesting dynamic where, like, some of the work drama carries over to home. I don't know, I liked this job choice for them, and I thought we got a lot of good storyline out of it just in general throughout the whole series.
I agree with you, definitely.
Yeah. Um
Something else.
Anything else about Jamie? I think, when we went to South Africa, he was very adventurous. He was he like, what do you call it? Zip line? Not zip line,
Bungee
but
jump.
like well, he did
Oh,
bungee jump, but he also did like
yes,
the
the
rappelling down the
repelling. Yeah.
mountain. He looks like an outdoor guy. He looks like a guy that would wear Birkenstocks with baggy jeans, which is not a compliment. But that's kind of it. I mean, I don't really have too much about Jamie. His
I
friends,
do.
yeah.
Call on me. Call on me. What
Yes,
about his
please,
like whole
Carrie.
spiritual journey? Remember, like that's kind of like also what
Right.
drew him into Julie was like
Right.
he wanted to become like more spiritual and like connect to someone on a higher level. Oh, look, Nitro is like making an appearance on screen so
Hi,
yeah,
Nitro.
he that part kind of took me by surprise. Like I
Yeah.
was kind of thrown when like the storyline of that episode was like Jamie finds his spirituality essentially, and like especially through Julie, which was um, very confusing to me. So yeah, I just thought that component of it was like a little out of left field for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's actually a really good point. And I think it's like very interesting. Jamie seems like the kind of guy who back then especially was like wanted to be the smartest guy in the room or like wanted he seemed just like a little pretentious, I guess is a good way to put
He's
it.
like
Like
a
he gave
current
everybody
finance
books.
bro. Yeah, he's a finance
Yeah,
bro. Like
total
he was
finance
big
bro.
on the W or like what do you call it? The dot
The
com
.com
boom.
boom. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. How we so lovingly referred to it back then in the early internet days. He yeah, he bought everybody books for I think Valentine's Day.
hmm
He just was like a little bit of like a pretentious kind of dude. So then he saw Julie as like this it almost seemed like a little like pet project almost, but like for himself. Like, oh, I can use her spirituality, or I don't even want to say it's spirituality for her. Hers is straight up
Religion.
Mormonism. It's not
Yeah.
really like that's like a religion that she's in, that she's runs her life at that time. And he kind of used it to his own benefit. And I think the other thing about Jamie, he had some friends come visit him, and we'll talk about this more with Melissa, but they went on the swamp trip together where the swamp boat driver tour guide
hmm
used the n-word, and Jamie kind of was like, don't let it bother you, to Melissa. But this is more of Melissa's storyline. I don't want to make it about Jamie, but Melissa had a really thoughtful conversation with Jamie toward the end of that episode that I would prefer to talk about it when we talk about Melissa rather than Jamie, and Julie too, to an extent. um Anything else about Jamie, or shall we move on?
No, I think my like final thought on Jamie is like I said, he was a great supporting character to a lot of the storylines. Like
Yeah.
when they addressed Tokyo's kind of like his separation from the rest of the
Hmm.
house guests, or I feel like house guests is big brother. So like roommates.
Yeah, I guess roommates.
Yeah, roommates is
Roommates is
probably
probably the
the
best
right
way.
word there. Um, he opened the conversation, but it wasn't
Mhm.
really like as much his conversation to have as it was some of the other people. Um, and he was kind of good for that. Like he was always around and he'd provide his, he was a good time, provide his input, but like
Mhm.
it wasn't besides his like whole spirituality thing. Um, there weren't a lot of very big Jamie
Yeah.
moments where it's like, oh my
Yeah.
God, he's learning something new entirely. Like he kind of just was like, oh yeah, I'm living with a gay guy for the first time. Okay, and like that was it. Like that was the only
Yeah.
revelation he had about that. Like there was just, it was kind of like he took everything in stride. And to be fair, like it's nice to have someone like that around when you have so many different people. Like the one who's kind of, I mean, going to be the one that's like, okay, don't worry about it, whether or not it should be something that someone should be allowed to worry about.
Right.
Like
Right.
at least having that presence around. And he was good for a laugh. He was good to be serious. He was good to take on problems, but he wasn't the one that you were coming back each week to watch.
Yeah. Exactly. He was a pillar of the show, but he wasn't like a main character of the show. And I honestly didn't see like a ton of growth from him as a person. He kind of like left the same person. It seems like that he came in as, but that's not necessarily the worst thing. I mean, like, I think at that time there's still a lot for so many people to learn, and less access to information than there is now. Um, but I'm interested to see more from him on Homecoming, because I would love to know more about the person he is now, because I feel like we really didn't get to know much about him. He was just kind of, like we said, the finance frat bro who wanted to take advantage of the .com boom and didn't want a girlfriend. So I hope we hear more from him about what he's up to now and if he has grown as a person.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
All right. Matt Smith. So Matt was 21 when he joined the Real World New Orleans home. He came from Hiawassee, Georgia, which I've never heard of before. And his biography on the Wikipedia page says Matt is a devout Catholic and an avid fan of hip hop and culture, which did not come through to me,
Right.
who's been pulling himself through Georgia Tech by working as a web designer. During the season, Matt occasionally criticizes Julie for her actions and says he has male instinct to protect her. She developed feelings for him, but he did not reciprocate, even when she playfully kissed him on the day they moved out of the house. Matt pursued girls in New Orleans, but never began a relationship on the show.
I felt like he kind of did admit his feelings for Julie though at the end. He wouldn't straight up say like, "Yeah, I have a crush on you," but he told her, "I have feelings for you that are not the same as my
Yes.
feelings towards Kelly and Melissa."
Yes, he did say that. He did say that. And that was, I took that as the same, like him kind of admitting that he did have some feelings for her. But I don't know if that means that, like, he did say the male instinct to protect her thing as well. So is it that she's just like a young religious girl who's out of her element and he wants to help her, which, like, he's also a young religious guy out of his
Yeah.
element? Or did he actually kind of have a little bit of a crush on her as she did on him?
I think the reason we know that it wasn't a full-on crush is that if it was, he would have asked her to sign his guest book.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So there's an episode toward the end of the season where they're out at, I think, the Red Room, which is a bar that they seem to frequent on the show. Could be the Red Room, I don't know 100%, but okay. And he meets a girl whose name I'm forgetting, I'm sorry to her, who's beautiful. And instead of giving her his phone number, he gives her his website and says, "Sign my guest book." And it ends up being this whole thing where he acts like he's like in love. He was at the bar with Melissa and Jamie, and they were walking back together, and he just kept talking about her. And they were like, "Why didn't you give her your phone number?" And he's like, "She's going to sign my guest book. Like, I know she's going to sign my guest book." And someone signs his guest book at 9:00 in the morning as her and says, "Who has a website? It's for pedophiles and something else."
Assholes.
But basically assholes and pedophiles. Yeah. And he, like, I guess takes it as like a playful, like, funny thing. Come to find out it was not her, it was Julie, as a joke. And he took that really personally. He was not happy with Julie.
Well, especially because he like called the bartender, I think, from the bar who knew that. Like,
yes, that is what.
I was
yes,
able to get her number from him. And
yes, that's a very important part that I left out.
He calls her and was like, hey, you signed my guest book? And she was like, no, I didn't. And
yeah,
she's like, I had no intentions of signing. Like, I have a boyfriend. He's like, okay, like, wish you the best, whatever. Which also, like, puts into perspective how difficult it was to have like a one-off interaction with someone and hope that you can find them later in 2000 versus now where it's like
no social media,
find their Instagram or whatever.
Nothing. I don't even know that they had cell phones necessarily back then. I mean, maybe. I mean, in the year 2000, yeah, they probably did. I think I probably had my first cell phone probably around 2001, maybe.
Really?
Yeah, I think so, probably.
I'm trying to think. Okay, so 2000, I was
and they're in their 20s, so I'm sure they had them.
So I do think cell phones existed because when my dad worked for Lego, he had this like black brick of a cell phone that Lego paid for, and that was definitely because he started later. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm sure they existed, but I bet you it was like a rich people thing at that point.
Yeah, I think they definitely existed. I don't think it was as like normalized for every single person to have a cell phone. But I'm sure in their personal lives they had them. I just don't think at that time they could bring them into the house if they did have them.
Pagers, to be honest.
Yeah, it probably was.
Like sending people 143 after you met them at the bar or whatever.
Right, exactly. So yeah, just different time in that sense. But yeah, how mortifying. You called the bartender to get her number. You call her and she says it wasn't me. So he's pretty mortified. He's pretty embarrassed. Not happy with Julie. And that leads to Julie like writing him a letter about, I guess, their somewhat contentious relationship in the house. And then that leads to him saying to Julie, like, "Thank you for writing me this letter." And we never get to see the letter or like read the letter. So we don't really know what it said, but she wrote it and said that she was like very honest about like their relationship and why it seems like they don't really get along as much as she wants to. I think for her, it's like a lot of frustration because she had a crush on him. And for him, he's just weird.
Well, Julia brought a guy over, and Matt was
and he was an asshole. Yes, he was a total asshole to this guy.
Given like he was like younger than Matt, but like he was like 18 and Matt's only 22. Like it's not a significant amount where you can be like, oh, hey child, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But he called him something that was rude.
It might have even been asshole, to be honest.
I think it might have been.
And Julie got mad about that, and that's I
Mhm.
think where the letter spawned from, because like
Right. Okay. Yes, you're
he
right.
was like, what, I don't understand, because even that guy was like, he probably likes you, and she was
Yeah,
like,
and she was
I
like,
don't know.
"What? Wait,
um
what?"
that she came back and was like, why were you so rude to him? And he was like, no, I wasn't, no, I wasn't. And she's like, you get mad when I bring like guys
Mhm.
around, but, and they kind of like butted heads from there.
Yeah.
um so yeah, he was a very weird character, and I think part of like my analysis of him has come from watching this last home, or the first homecoming episode,
Mhm.
is seeing like how much he hasn't grown. um
Yeah.
in his views, at least that's how it's portrayed in the previews. And if you think about all these different experiences and people he met through his time out in New Orleans, he never really like grew to accept as much as he did to just tolerate.
Yeah.
And nothing really like changed about him. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
he just he took things in stride, which were different from his religion and his beliefs, but he never really like welcomed new ideologies or anything with
Right.
open arms. It was kind of just like, I have my life, you live your life, as long as your life doesn't interfere negatively with mine, fine. But he didn't accept it. It was just like, okay,
Right.
cool, we'll each do our own thing. Um, I think out of all of the people on this series, he had the least growth.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think he, to your point, I also don't feel like he had very genuine relationships with anyone on the show except for Tokyo. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like he and Tokyo did end up getting somewhat close and were, he at least had the closest relationship with Tokyo out of anybody in the house, I think, throughout most of the series, which could, I think, maybe be due to him keeping it surface level with everyone. He didn't really want to go deeper with a lot of people in the house.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Tokyo wasn't necessarily open at the time to going deeper with people. So their relationship probably worked out well in that way, where I think anybody else that wanted to go deeper with Matt didn't really scratch the surface. He was not very accepting of Danny. And he said that a few times about how, sex is between a man and a woman, it's for reproduction. He was very pro abstinence and saving himself until he was married, which I don't know that this biography mentioned, but that was like a
Yeah.
huge part of his storyline. Um, so I don't know. I agree though, because it seems like even in Homecoming, he still isn't willing to say that being gay is okay, or having different sexual orientations than a straight man and a woman getting married just to have children is okay. It doesn't seem like he's accepting of that.
All right, I'm going to ask a question that I don't know if you've wanted to think about or if you've
Yeah.
even thought about it, but like, do you think the only time he's had sex with his wife is to have children? Like, do you think he's had sex since the birth of his sixth child?
Okay, yes, I think he has, but I also think he seems like the type of person, and like no shade to anybody religious, I'm sorry if it comes off that way, but I think he's the type of religious that like doesn't believe in birth control.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and I don't know, I'm just assuming. So sorry, Matt, if you ever hear this and that's not true, not the truth. But that's kind of how you portray yourself. So I'm sorry. But I feel like anytime he has sex with his wife, he knows that there's an opportunity for her to get pregnant and he doesn't care. I don't think that's the goal, but I think like he doesn't care and would be open to just like having her pop babies out because that's what it's for.
I mean,
That's what it's
he's from
for.
a family of like five, I think. He's either one of five or one of six,
Yeah.
if I recall. Um, so that kind of, he's at like the same place of the environment that he was like raised
Yeah.
in. So
Yeah.
yeah, I have
Yeah.
thought
So
about it. I'm like,
he seems like, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, but he seems like the type that like is just happy in his little religious lifestyle, found a girl who is suitable to live that lifestyle with him. They have 6 kids now. They'll probably have more kids. I mean, they're relative. Well, I don't know. It depends on how old his wife is, but they could have more kids. It's
mm-hmm.
totally possible. And that's probably his life. He lives in Phoenix, Arizona now, which we know in pockets is very conservative. So good luck to you, Matt, I guess. I mean, I don't really have much more to say about Matt. He was one of the main hosts on the show on the Real 7 along with Kelly, and he did a pretty good job of like improvisation at times. So he had a little bit more charisma than you would kind of expect him to have in some areas. But he really, again, to me, I don't feel like made a huge impact on the season as a whole. Like I don't feel like he had a person where like, oh, they really connected really deeply, or like, I don't know. He just kind of fell a little flat for me.
Biggest storyline, and first of all, I'm gonna apologize right now, but there is someone going up and down our stairs outside the apartment, which is a guaranteed way to make my dog bark. So I'm gonna shake the treats bag at him again, and I'm gonna kick him. So if you hear weird noises from my end, I apologize, but I don't know if he's walking up and down the stairs. Why are you doing? There's only like we only have the apartment next to us, but anyway. Yeah, I just think his like storyline was Julie for the most part.
Yeah, and I think it was mostly like Julie's storyline, and he was like a side character in it.
Yeah, the part of it, like it could have, you could have replaced him with a different male, and
yes,
it doesn't change much.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
He definitely gets away. I think, yeah, he gets away with just like not having much growth except in the, and I don't think he had to like grow as much to create the relationship with Tokyo. I think that he just had the most patience in terms of reaching out regularly and trying to involve him more than the rest of the cast did.
Yeah, I think so too.
But I am interested to see like conversations between him and Danny during Homecoming, because
me too.
Danny has said like there's things that were said and done during my time on Real World that if they were said now, that's not gonna like, I'm not gonna let them get away with it, is what he said basically.
Right.
And so that must have been some shade at Matt, because he is the one who, I mean, Julie got at least at a level with Danny. I don't know where she got in terms of her like level of acceptance with just like homosexuality in general, but at least
seems like not far.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about it.
But there's definitely gonna be conversations there that are gonna put Matt on the hot seat, and I'm interested to see the conversations. I think they've already kind of showed us in the confessional where he's gonna try and shut that conversation down, but it'll be harder to ignore another person who's trying to have that conversation with you.
Yeah, and I hope that they kind of force it a little bit, because I think Matt was a how I want to say almost like a product of the circumstance. I almost said victim of circumstance, but product of circumstance of like there not being a ton of information out there. We were not as a progressive time, and I want to make sure that I want to disclaim. I know that even now is not that progressive of a time. I just think people have learned a little bit more. But I know we said this last time that there are still laws being enacted in the United States that are taking rights away from people that are LGBTQ plus part of that community, and trans, and just even voting rights for people of color. Like it's just like we are consistently regressing, but there's more information out about it now. It's more accessible. So that's what I mean when I say progressive in that way, more like maybe technologically progressive. So it gives people a chance to learn a little bit more that ignorance can't be bliss anymore, I think, for a lot of people. But that's why I hope, I think Matt got away with that, because there was no forcing function for him to have to confront it. And I think now there is, and people are a little bit less tolerant of views that are maybe as ignorant as his are.
Or you surround yourself by enough people that like that's your sounding board, who have like the same views.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
Exactly. Okay. Well, moving on from Matt, let's talk about the Queen, Melissa Howard, the star of the show. She's my absolute favorite Real World. We've talked about this last time, but my absolute favorite Real World cast member of all time. I've been following her through her like post Real World days as much as possible. So she had a website. It used to be called Princess Melissa. It was a blog. So I used to follow her there.
You weren't lying. Like you were following.
No, I'm not lying. Her. I loved her. Yeah. Follow her on Twitter. She has a podcast that I actually haven't listened to her podcast yet, but I will be planning on it. But I'm a big fan of hers in general. And somebody shared some receipts from Princess Melissa, which I think we could talk about probably in the homecoming episode, where she talks a lot more about what happened with Julie and the college stuff, which is really interesting. But I think that's more of a homecoming conversation. But so we have that to look forward to. Wayback Machine came through on princessmelissa.com. Melissa Howard was 22. She's now Melissa Beck. 22 years old. Her hometown is Tampa, Florida. And her Wikipedia biography says Melissa is half African American and half Filipino, whom MTV describes as a 5'2" bundle of manic wit, which is quite a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Her friends compare her to Chris Rock for her sense of humor, which is interesting, I think. She admits she doesn't easily get along with other women and demands attention from guys. I don't know who wrote these biographies, by the way. This is just on Wikipedia, so this could have been anybody. Her mother is very traditional Filipino, and Melissa's eager to leave Tampa, which she feels is largely populated by closed-minded people. Melissa sometimes channeled her emotions into painting after she befriended Lionel Milton, a popular New Orleans artist. She was part of the cast of Oxygen Network's defunct prank show, Girls Behaving Badly, which was after the show. She married on September 29th, 2007, and is now named Melissa Beck. So Melissa, to me, is like, there's three main characters of this show. Melissa is one, Julie's the other, Danny's the third. These are actually, and Tokyo. So let's say four. I think that these are the four main focal points of the show, whereas Jamie, Kelly, and Matt kind of fade into the background. But we get a ton of Melissa in this show. We get a ton of just hearing her perspective and her background, and she really drives the series forward. And she's like a firecracker. She's amazing. I think she's a star. We talked about her on Homecoming. She's hilarious. She's super smart. And I think even for the age of 22, like, she just had a really good head on her shoulders back then.
Mm-hmm.
What are your immediate thoughts about Melissa?
Oh, I enjoyed watching her so much on the season, and like just seeing how her wit has grown into that first episode of Homecoming. Like, someone who's witty that's the easiest way for me to at least like respect you, because if you can like keep up with the banter or like drive the banter, that to me is just like one of the best character traits the person can have, and that's Melissa. She has something to say, and when she does, it's usually funny or intelligent or both, you know, that like
Exactly.
I want to hear what she has to say on things. And in a show like this, like, that's great, because when there's 7 voices and one you're like looking forward to hearing from, that makes you stand out from the rest of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Melissa played the role of the only woman of color in the house, and she had a very, let's say, fraught relationship with Tokyo at the time as the only male person of color in the house. She definitely wanted them, and we talked about this a little bit in the Homecoming premiere recap, but she wanted them to be close and wanted to relate to him a little bit more. And Tokyo was just a little bit closed off. They started early on bonding, but then one night Melissa ended up drinking a lot, and he just was like not into it and got very weird about it. And then they had a falling out because of that. And then it seemed like they never really repaired their relationship fully. And then Tokyo became more reclusive to the roommates. And I mean, I don't want to say reclusive because he was going out, he was making friends and meeting people, but just not with the roommates. So toward the end of the season, they had a conversation, and it seems like they met each other halfway. And when they leave in the airport, she says, this is like a really bittersweet moment, because they did start to get closer toward the end of the show. But it was just so late in the game. The show was 5 months long where they were in the house. So that's kind of her relationship with Tokyo. She did start, she started painting, and that was like a really good, it seemed like a therapeutic release for her to kind of pour some of her emotions into her art. She got really close with Lionel, who was the artist. She actually had her own gallery showing, and she was really touched that Tokyo ended up coming. Some of the roommates came. I think Jamie and Tokyo went, maybe a few others. And people were wanting to buy her artwork. Her artwork was so cute, by the way. Like, it was so good. Just loved all of her pieces and stuff. She would make these small little canvases with how she kind of like pictured herself, and then would put an emotion on the canvas. And it was just like it was a very cool thing that she did.
Yeah. And that was just like one of the many things we saw with Melissa throughout the season. And she, like, it was hard to have an episode that, even when it seemed like the episode was going to focus on someone else, like that she didn't have a part of it in some way.
Right.
There's very few episodes where you didn't get much Melissa. It was nice. I also appreciate how she was just like very open about her feelings, whether it was in terms of mental health, when she was like seeking out help for it, and how the painting helped her, or when she was like, yeah, sometimes I do use alcohol to cope, and like, but at the same time, she's had family members who've had experiences with that. She realized she shouldn't, and just like, she was very open with her highs and her lows, which I'm sure that the impact that that had for like the people she felt she represented, to see someone on such a national scale be so open about like, yeah, some days I'm really super happy, and then other days I'm really super sad, and yeah, there's reasons for it, like my past relationships with my family and all this stuff, and or just even when her like boyfriend but not a boyfriend came in from Tampa, and how she didn't really like hold anything back with that either. She didn't hold anything back, period. And that's what made her so good on this show, is that she was willing to more or less bear it all for us. And that is like what you need in one of these roommates to be a great cast member.
Yeah, and Melissa was unapologetically herself. That's for sure. And she still is. And I love that hasn't changed about her at all. And, you know, I think kind of like similar to what we were saying about Matt, but in the opposite vein, people didn't have access to a lot of information back then like we do today. The internet was very, very new. Matt was like making his own website, but it was the year 2000, 1999, 2000. Like Google, I don't think existed yet in the way that it does. We didn't have social media. Twitter wasn't a thing. So it's like the news wasn't like as readily available, or like not even news, but just access to information. So you could learn something about things that were not maybe part of your immediate world. And Melissa was just so like, I just feel like wise beyond her years, and was able to articulate so many things that even today are still conversations that we're having. Like she always took the role of Julie's teacher, which I think is unfortunate that she had to do that, but it never seemed like it was a burden for her. But some of the things that Julie felt comfortable saying in front of specifically Melissa and Tokyo and Danny is mind-boggling. And Melissa always handled it with such class, and she didn't have to. Like, I don't think she ever had to. But you know, she took it with stride, and she realized like Julie just doesn't know any better. And just the tolerance she showed of that is, I think, a feat in and of itself, because Julie, well, we'll talk about Julie. But there was a scene at the swamp where Melissa went with Jamie and his friends and Julie to, I guess, go on a swamp tour or something. I don't know. That was a very weird choice of activity, but I get it.
That's like a normal thing to do in New Orleans, though.
Yeah. That's why I'm like, you know, it's New Orleans. Maybe it's not weird. It's weird as a New Yorker, but it's not weird for anybody who's not a New Yorker, I'm sure. But they went, and the tour guide used a racial slur. And Melissa was rightfully upset about it. But everybody else around her was not upset. And I guess they kind of like laughed it off a little bit. And she was just like, you know, everybody should be offended by this. I shouldn't be the only one as a Black woman in the car to be offended by this. Like, everybody should be offended. And Jamie was kind of like, just don't let it ruin your trip or your time. And she was upset about that. She was hurt by that, because she thought Jamie was her friend and someone who supported her. And he kind of just like brushed off her feelings. And it always felt like she really took the educator role in the house to explain, like, everybody should be offended by racism. It shouldn't just be me. Everybody should be offended by this. And in that same episode, she and Tokyo were explaining to Julie why Julie was not allowed to say the N-word, which is like truly shocking to me as a white person who grew up knowing that word is not okay and that you should never say that word. Like, it's shocking to me that there are people, and this is my ignorance, that there are white people out there that don't either know this or practice this. And especially just to hear Julie like repeating it back to them as if it's nothing. And like even Jamie was saying it in his confessional. And I was like, guys, you can't use this word. It was just like, that was like mind-blowing to me. That I think is a sign of the times. But, you know, she has this conversation with Julie And Danny comes in and is like, I understand in a way, because as a gay man, like there are just things that I'm always going to have to deal with. And as a Black woman, there are things that you're always going to have to deal with. So, and Julie was kind of like, well, you can't just accept it. You have to change it. And like was kind of putting the onus on them to change the world essentially.
Yeah.
And Melissa was kind of like, I go to bed knowing that no matter what, I'm going to be oppressed, either as a woman, as a person of color. Like, I just know this is my reality. And Julie's like, well, you changed my life and look at the impact you've made on one person. And it just was like, again, Julie just coming from a place where it's kind of all about her. And I know we haven't talked about Julie yet, but like, it's not Melissa's job to be Julie or anybody else's teacher. So I like felt for her in that scenario. It felt like she was kind of very alone.
It also seemed like Melissa was probably the most passionate about creating relationships with everybody else in the house. Like you can tell that she really tried. We saw that in her relationship with Julie. Like there's points throughout it where like Julie said, like, you're the most important person in this house to me. And like their friendship seemed very solid. Obviously, we see that is not the case post this series.
Yep.
If you watch the first episode of Homecoming, then you know. I mean, her relationship with Jamie might have been fueled by like sexual desire, but nonetheless, they still created a bond with each other.
Mm-hmm.
She tried with Tokyo. They had their difficulties. And then even with like when Kelly, which not to like fast forward to Kelly too much, but I didn't realize like Kelly more or less just bounced from living in the house for like 3 months. Like I did not realize that until I think it was like the second to last episode where it was like put in the forefront of like, yeah, Kelly hasn't been here. Like the only reason she's here right now is because Peter's out of town or whatever.
Yep.
And Melissa was very upfront with her saying like, yeah, I want to have a relationship with you. We haven't done a ton of stuff, but you haven't been here through everything. And like, we aren't going to be able to create the same depth of a relationship that I have with some of the other people who like I'm hanging out with every day, I'm cleaning with, I'm doing all this stuff. And it just seemed like she cared the most about getting to, I guess, like get the most out of each of what she could learn and experience with her individual roommates and as a whole as well, but definitely on an individual level.
Yeah, and I think I agree 1,000%. And I think, she came in as a fan of the show. And I think she really put in what she wanted to get out of the show, which I don't feel like everybody else on the cast did. But Melissa, I feel like, was her genuine self from the start to the finish. And we saw growth in her, the art, talking about her feelings, trying to make these relationships with everyone in the house. And I'm just thankful that we had her. I think she was a really, really great addition to this cast and the show's alumni in general. And I don't have a bad thing to say about her. Truly, I don't. I think she's great.
Yeah, same. If anything, my one bad thing is like, why are you not doing more with your personality right now in the year 2022 so that I can consume your content in whatever form it is? Like, just start making TikToks or something. That's all I need.
Yeah, I think she's been a little bit of a private person. It seems like she kind of stepped out of the spot. A lot of this cast did really step out of the spotlight, more so I think than any other Real World cast. Maybe save for Julie, I think, but she did a little bit now, but afterward, I think she was probably the most present out of anybody. And, Melissa's had a private Twitter for a really long time. She, I don't believe, was on Instagram up until this show started. I think, this is kind of bringing her out of her shell. She made a separate public Twitter that's specifically for the show. So I think now she's like getting back into it. She's doing a lot of press around the show. But I think she kind of like enjoyed her privacy a little. I think, it seems like the aftermath of this show is so huge that it was overwhelming for a lot of them. And they were so young, like this to be thrust into the spotlight at this time. Like they were just really young people. But I'm glad that we're going to get more of her. She did an interview with a podcaster who I really like, Danny Pellegrino. He podcasts about the Real Housewives. He has a show called Everything Iconic, but he talks a lot about a lot of other pop culture as well. He's great. Check him out if you haven't. Shout out to him. And he interviewed her and was like, why are you not on the Challenge All Stars? And she was like, I told them that I would do it if they would just let me come and do commentary. And hello, we need that. We need commentary. We need her. But take TJ out, put Melissa in for All Stars. I'm all in
Not
on
even
it.
that. Just like have. You remember how Rob and Sandra like were up in their little tree house?
Yes.
Like, give me Melissa and CT up in a tree
Or
house.
Melissa and Coral. Can we get Melissa and Coral?
Yes.
Because we know I mean Coral, I'm obsessed with Coral as well. She's my second
I
favorite
wish that they would
housecast.
get Coral like on the show.
I heard that they reached out and that she was gonna do it and then didn't. I don't know why. I don't know what ended up happening there, but I know they were in touch with her too.
Yeah, I think they sent out a lot of feelers. But
Coral's an icon,
yeah.
another icon.
I would love commentary from Melissa on anything. Like if she just wanted to narrate my life, that's fine.
Yeah.
Roast me. I don't care.
Agreed. Totally agreed. Okay. Moving on from Melissa. Let's talk about Danny. So Danny Roberts was 22 years old when he entered the house. He was from Rockmart, Georgia. And his Wikipedia biography, again, don't know who wrote these. So not that there's anything wrong with it. I haven't read it yet, so I don't know, but just a disclaimer. Danny is a man whom MTV, is that correct, describes as an adorable, spontaneous, and playful modern day, in quotes, James Dean, with a devilish grin and sly gaze. This is bizarre. Who, having escaped small town roots, is something of a lost soul. Okay. He is close to his mother, but not as much so with his strict father. Despite being gay, he does not connect with the local gay community back home in Atlanta. During his stay in the house, Danny was in a relationship with Paul Dill, an officer in the military. To protect Paul's identity during his visits, his face was blurred each time he appeared on camera. After his time in the military ended, Danny and Paul appeared together in an MTV special with Paul's face no longer blurred.
Well, I didn't realize that.
I also didn't realize that.
Because everyone, it seems like it's a shock that he's not going to have his face blurred in the homecoming episode. Yep. But that's not the first time. That's almost kind of a letdown. I wish I didn't read that last sentence.
I know. I kind of didn't know that either, but sorry.
God damn it, Wikipedia.
I know. So Danny is another one who I feel like is a main pillar of this cast. The impact that Danny had on just pop culture at that time and just the amount of teaching, maybe unintentional teaching that Danny and Paul did at that time. It's just kind of crazy to think about because Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. I don't know what year, but I think it was during the Obama administration. And
for whatever reason, 2014 came to my head, but
let's look it up. I think that was gay marriage potentially, but could be. Let's see really quickly.
Was I right?
2011. But it was instilled in 1994, which was during the Clinton administration, which is interesting. So for anybody that doesn't know, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was an official United States policy that if you were in the military and you were a gay man, a bisexual, or lesbian, or anybody in the LGBTQ community, you were not able to serve in the military. You would be dishonorably discharged. So it's very risky for Paul to come on the show as an active officer in the military at that time with this policy because it was risking his whole career and essentially his life. I mean, like he could go back into the military, people could find out, and it could be, you don't know what could have happened to him at that time. So it was very risky. And we know that he only had met Danny 3 weeks, I think, before going into the Real World house. So the relationship was very new. It seemed very intense in the way that they had connected.
Yeah, they were like using the L word very quickly.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, Portia told what's his face, Dennis, that they loved each other on the first night. So who am I to judge? That worked out real well. So
yeah, that's going great for them. Listen, they have a cute kid out of it. So Valencia says, I remember the interview with Paul because I really wanted to see what he looked like. He was cute. I don't think I ever saw it. That was news to me. So I think we're going to see Paul for sure on Homecoming, at least in video form. I don't know if he's actually going to show up. They allude to it in the preview, but I don't know if he's actually going to come. You know, sometimes they bait and switch on those things, but we'll see. But Danny had just recently come out, I think, to his family prior to coming on the show. So this was really his like first like foray, it seems like, into kind of like being on his own and being himself, fully and truly himself.
Mhm.
He really connected with Kelly. It seemed like on the show they were really good friends. He said sort of at the end of the series that he had the closest relationship with Kelly and was going to keep in touch with her after the show. Seemed like nobody kept in touch after this, so I don't know that they did do that. But Danny also had a pretty close relationship with Melissa and with Julie, and he is another one who I feel like really filled in that like teacher role for Julie, and teaching her just like about gay culture and that gay people exist and that they're not the devil. So it was interesting to see her interact with Danny, or Danny interact with her, I guess. And the one thing about Julie is that she is unapologetically like herself in a way where she just like asks questions that people don't usually ask,
Mhm.
which I feel like brought a lot out of Danny and Melissa specifically, um, which means we really got to see like their personality and their thought process and how they, process a lot of these things. And I feel like they were both so gracious to be that way, and allow us to see that side of them on the show.
I think part of it was also how they both, and maybe not just both, but I think the whole house viewed Julie was that like she's this naive little
Yeah.
church girl,
Yeah.
and it was almost their obligation to enlighten her, but she also was receptive to learning.
Yeah.
It wasn't just trying. It wasn't like with Matt where
Yeah.
like you could have had the same conversations with Matt. He was in the Catholic Church is just as fucked up as like
Hmm.
Mormonism in its own
Hmm.
ways. Sorry, Catholics, and I guess Mormons, whatever. So,
Yeah.
um, any religion I offend from here on out, my apology is right
Yeah.
now.
Blanket
I'm sorry.
apology. Yeah.
Um, but I like you said, those two being teachers for her, they weren't just teachers for her, they were
Hmm.
teachers for massive amounts of population of
Yep.
America because I've a barking dog again. We how many people got to see like a 22-year-old like good looking dude who probably could have passed in high school as like the jock who
Yeah.
um like was a ladies man and all this stuff, like he had the looks for it, like he's your all American boy next door type of thing.
Exactly.
um and then for other men of his age or even younger to see him and how he was accepted by his castmates and how he got to like be himself and really live his life for the first time. He wasn't just teaching Julie, it's just that Julie was the in-person student.
Yeah.
Really, he got to educate America through his actions, and again, like to put the burden of representation on
Yeah.
Melissa, on Danny, on Tokyo, like
Yeah.
the the people who were cast to represent these minority roles and subgroups, like um, that's such a tough place to be. But especially Melissa and Danny, I think did an outstanding job of not only just like taking on this role and enlightening people around them, but also like truly living and experiencing their own experiences at the same time. That
Yeah.
it wasn't as I could see it being driven. Like I need to represent my group of people in a way, and every action is built off of that. Where like, no, they went and had fun and
Yeah.
showed that like if I can be me, you can be you.
Exactly.
And Danny was so good at that.
Yeah. I completely agree with everything that you said. And Danny, we have some of us have a group chat on Twitter for people who are 30 and older. And
I'm
we've
not
been
in it.
talking, oh well, I'm happy to add you. And we
Please.
were talking about
I've got some years plus 30.
yeah,
I
no,
was
I'll
born in
definitely
the
add you.
80s.
I will absolutely add you. So we all were kind of talking about this show because a lot of people have been revisiting it or watch Homecoming, and because we're all of the age where this was like a huge impact on us. And we were talking about how Danny was kind of like the millennials generation, older millennial, elder millennial version of Pedro, where Pedro was to Gen X. Pedro was a roommate on The Real World San Francisco. He unfortunately passed away due to complications of AIDS, but he was an AIDS educator, and he was. I don't know if he was HIV positive or had AIDS when he was in the house. I know they're two separate things, but he was very open about it, and he put a spotlight on it, and he taught so many people that, you can still live a full life, and you shouldn't be treated any differently because you have this virus. And I feel like Danny was an educator in a way for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, because we got to see the impact of that on him and Paul. And we got to see, it just puts a face to this, like, stigma, I guess. But I don't want to say that it's a stigma, but it just, like, it puts a face on some of these, like, things that people just may not always have exposure to, especially back in the early 2000s or in the 90s in Pedro's case, where, like, you may hear things about it, or you may see things in the media about it, but then you get to see these people actually living their lives, and you get to see who they are, and you get to see, like, they're, like you said, just being authentically themselves and going out and having a good time, and just, like, making other people aware, and making people who are similar to them probably feel like they have a voice now, like, it just feeling more accepted, and seeing them get accepted by the public probably made so many other young gay men or gay women or anybody in the LGBTQ community hopefully see that and feel like they can also be just as accepted as Danny was in some of those ways.
Yeah, and I remember looking
And Valencia
up,
says Pedro used to say HIV positive. Don't think he ever said AIDS. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you for that.
I remember looking it up. I'm like, when did Ellen come out? Because I feel like that it was 1994. I looked it up when I was looking up something else. And so, I mean, 6 years seems like a long time, but, like, if you think of all of the negative shit that happened to Ellen after coming
absolutely.
out, like, she lost a lot of, I mean, her show, like, people weren't casting her, all these things, and this was, like, maybe more public now about the negative she experienced, but, like, that was, like, a monumental thing. And to think, like, only 6 years later, here is MTV, like, casting Danny, who is just, like, unapologetically living his life. And he said that he's like, this is the first time I'm feeling free. And to just, again, like, have that on TV and let people see it. And I mean, like, shout out to MTV for also framing it well, like, because I feel like they've handled other situations with especially, like, minority or subgroups of populations not as well, that like, they got this, they did this right. Yeah, and, like, in addition to just, like, Danny being a poster boy in a way, that we also had Danny just I think, like, him and Jamie shared similarities in, like, how they also were good supporting characters for other, like, situations going on. Like, if Danny wasn't the focal point of something, I feel like a lot of things we saw with him dealt with, like, him trying to not to cheat on Paul, essentially. He was still involved with the housemates, and we got to see his, like, one-on-one relationship with Kelly, especially. And I feel like Kelly really took an interest in just like learning more from him. And he was a good person that if he wasn't in the spotlight, like, he was still there doing his thing and adding to situations. He wasn't, if it wasn't just him, like, he wasn't removed entirely. So I appreciate that about him as a character within everyone else's stories as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really did seem like he had a totally to your point. And I like, the thing that's sticking out to me is when he goes to see Melissa in her room when she's upset about what happened at the swamp, and he's just listening to her, and he says, I can relate to you in a way because of that. And he's a really good supporting character, but he's also just always there, and is just a really, really great addition to this cast. So we love Danny. We love Melissa. We love having them on our screens. I think we got really, really lucky with some of this casting. This season at the time was, like, one of the most popular, if not the most popular season of The Real World. Like, these people hit, like, stardom immediately. The gelling of this cast together. It just, like, I don't know. It just, something about it just, like, it just really hit for everybody. And that transcended anything else that had come out at that time.
I don't know if I have much more to say on Danny.
Yeah. No, me neither. I think we can.
Who I am, like, most excited about, except for Melissa in Homecoming, though. Like, undisputedly.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear more about his relationship with Paul. I think the one thing that we didn't talk about is that his family did come and visit, and they met Paul. And his mom was a lot more supportive of his dad than his dad, I think. And, his dad was a little bit standoffish with Paul. But we did get to see them. I think they were down by the water somewhere. And he and Paul and Danny's dad did connect a little bit. And Paul was just like, oh, I'm so glad that your dad was nice to me. They had a good day. But I don't know that that Danny ever said, like, Paul is my boyfriend to them. And I think Danny kind of said that, like, I want to be able to say, like, this is my boyfriend, Paul. But I thought that was, we got to see a lot of different dynamics with Danny. All right, we can go ahead and move on to Kelly. Kelly was 21 at the time. Kelly Limp, now Kelly Wolf, married to Scott Wolf of Party of Five fame. She came from Fayetteville, Arkansas. And her Wikipedia biography says that Kelly is a sorority girl who is dating a medical student named Peter and spent her time with him rather than in the house. MTV describes her as an opinionated, sassy, strong-willed, direct in her honesty, and loyal to her friends. What are your immediate thoughts on Kelly?
Well, like I said earlier, I did not realize that she was like living with Peter for over half of the season until Melissa confronted her about it, like with an episode left, which I guess like can be taken in one of two ways. It's just I thought that she like wasn't playing a major role in like situations happening in the house, or that she was just like boring and not worth putting on there. But she never really struck me as boring when she was involved. Like, especially earlier on the season, like when you saw her like really developing that relationship with Danny, and then like going to lunch, and then her kind of having to go head to head with Tokyo because of their conflicts in terms of like work and all of that. Like she did always stand her ground. I didn't think she was I personally didn't think she was boring, so that's why I guess I was kind of confused why we weren't getting a lot of her, and then it kind of made sense because she just like wasn't living there. Also, I'm kind of surprised that like MTV allowed that.
Yeah, there was another season, one of the more recent seasons. I think it was Skeletons, one of the last seasons that aired. And there was this guy Bruno on there, and he met a girl and was like staying with her almost the whole time too. So like it's happened before. I'm sure it's happened again in other seasons too, but that's the other instance that really stands out to me. But yeah, I am kind of surprised. Like you were cast on the show to live in this house, and you're not living in in the house. So it's interesting. The one thing that like I remember from Kelly from when I watched this originally back in 2000 was that she always used to say she wanted to be like Oprah, and that she wanted to like, make that impact. Which I thought was a little, like, it's interesting. I mean, she was definitely driven. She definitely was a hard worker and really wanted to make a good impression on Elton and wanted to do a really good job on the show. Which I think she did. I just don't think we got more of her than that. Like that was really her main storyline, her and Peter. And she met this guy Peter at a bar. He ended up having a girlfriend at the time, but then broke up with his girlfriend for Kelly. The girlfriend didn't live in the state. And she ended up staying in New Orleans to be with Peter after the show ended.
Yeah, Kelly's storyline like really ran out for me basically when she met Peter. I really liked what she was able to provide Danny in terms of like you could tell that Danny felt more comfortable with her, and that like Kelly would ask questions and stuff, but it seemed like she had at least a bit more understanding, not understanding, but just like openness, like okay, tell me about you, tell me about this, like how is being gay impacting these things or whatever. Like she was very open with her questions, but they weren't like Julie like questions. It wasn't trying to figure out like, oh, that gay people aren't bad. It was more like,
right.
No, I think you're awesome. Now, like, tell me about you individually, and like seeing him for more than just being like a gay male. She realized like this is part of his, like him and his identity, but is not his entire identity. So,
right.
Like I wish that she was around more to get more of that friendship, especially like as Matt had to, or not as Matt, as Danny had to like deal with the Matt stuff, and Matt kind of not like really changing his or mind, or just I don't know. So Yeah, I liked what Kelly brought when she was there, and I think it's unfortunate that she was allowed to not have to be there
Yeah.
because that's part of it. Like I get that you're going and living in a new place, but I feel like there should have been some sort of okay, you have to sleep in the house like every other night or whatever it
Right.
is, and or like you have to be with the other cast members at least for 4 hours during a day.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah, I
if
guess they saw each other at work, but that's probably it,
yeah,
really. Um,
Valencia asked, didn't Kelly and Danny do a challenge together in the early days? There was the
I just looked it up actually.
okay,
And they did Battle of the Seasons in the year 2022. Oh my God, 2002, not 2022. Oh my God, I wish. And they won, actually. They won along with Mike the Miz, who we know as the Miz now, and
mhm.
Coral, and Sean Duffy, who we no longer speak about, and Elka Walker from Boston. So they were the winners, actually. They represented New Orleans together.
Nice. So
Yeah,
yes, there they were.
yeah, they were. But that's her only challenge season.
Yeah, it's hard to
And
access
Danny's only
those
challenge season.
early challenge seasons, so recalling that for me is
Mhm.
difficult. Um, I think the earliest one that I've seen like more recently was maybe Inferno 1. Maybe it was a
Mm.
little before that. I don't think I've ever told you this, but when I was working at camp, I was like in charge of our LITs, which is um, leaders in training. So they were like 16 and 17-year-olds who would take on some counselor responsibilities, but really like we're still too young to be full on counselors. And so we were doing a movie night, and I had like bought Black Panther to show them. But because like our projector was so old, when you connected it to the laptop, like you got this error message being like, you cannot use this to
Mhm.
project it. So the only like video content I had saved on my computer was a very early season of the challenge.
Oh,
Like
that's kind of amazing.
the ones where like they were like doing wheelbarrow races and that was
Yeah.
like the challenge for that
Yeah.
episode.
The good
I'm
old
like
days.
I'm like, all right, guys, like this is what we're watching. So I have a bunch of like 17-year-olds fully invested in a season of
I
the
love
challenge
that.
from like 2005. And so we watched like the first like 5 or 6 episodes because they were like 20 minutes long. And
Yeah.
then we watched like the finale because we didn't like have a lot of time left. And like they're like, can we watch like the rest of the episodes or like a different season for our next movie night? Like I still had
That's
kids
amazing.
when they like came back as counselors a few years later, like we like watch the challenge like for real now all the time because of that movie night.
I love that. That's so good.
I was like, sorry, this is all we can do. Like this is the only thing that
Sounds great to me.
I mean, I loved it, but I wasn't expecting them to like get as into it as they did, and they were like super cool about it. But
I love
yeah,
that.
I wish there was an easier way to access like early challenge seasons because that would be on
Yeah.
repeat for me.
Yeah. Paramount Plus has some, but not, they don't go as far back as I wish that they did. Same with the real world. They have like one, two, three, and four, and then they skip a few. And then I think then the earliest one is now, is this one,
Yeah, and
season
then skip
9, and
to
then it goes
12, I
10.
think.
Yeah. Yeah. We go to Vegas after this, which I think is the one right after this. And that's kind of like when the show changes. But,
Mhm.
yeah, they have like random, it doesn't make sense to me. I always used to think that they didn't have these seasons because of like maybe music rights issues, but there's like no copyrighted music in this New Orleans season. So like,
Mhm.
why are you holding this back from us?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. We need to make some friends with some higher up people at CBS.
Yeah, we do. We really do. It seems like the more like this homecoming stuff comes out,
Mhm.
we're getting more. It's just, we want it all. Give it all to
Yeah.
us. Okay. If nothing else on Kelly, let's move on to the controversial Julie Stofer. So it says she's 21 in the house, but I think she really was only 20. She talks about how she's 20. So this could be wrong, or I could be wrong, one of the two, but I do believe she was only 20.
She mentioned being 20 at least once on the season.
Yeah. So she came from Delafield, Wisconsin. And her biography says Julie is a Mormon college student who was attending Brigham Young University and was worried about repercussions from the school administration as she was living with men as well as women in violation of the school's honor code. Her coming to terms with the word world outside of her home and upbringing was a recurring theme throughout the season. Julie's strained relationship with her father was also a focal point of the show. They have a heated argument where her parents come to visit And her father dismisses her as just being emotional.
That made me so mad when that happened. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So, where do we begin with Julie? I don't know. There's so
I
much to say about Julie. I don't even know where to start.
here's where I would begin. She was definitely MTV's main character
Yes,
in this
1,000%.
series, and a lot of storylines involved Julie.
Yes.
Whether or not she was the main person in it, she definitely had some input in it somehow, some way, for a lot of stuff. And I think like it was very much evident in the last scene as she's not roller skating, she's skateboarding through the airport, and like the person who's giving like their main memory of each person is Julie. Like, and she was definitely MTV's focal point in terms of who they could drive the story around.
Yeah. And I kind of get it, because it's like she's kind of this rare casting choice of, like, I don't want to say choice, but like this rare person that kind of came out of the woodwork to say, like, I'm a Mormon and I'm going to break all the rules of my school to come live in this house. And like, of course they're going to use her as probably the main character, because everything that she does and everything that she says is coming from such a sheltered lens that, like, she made good TV, but she's also a very exhausting person to watch on TV, especially in the lens of 2022.
Yeah. She was, I think, the first Mormon cast on The Real World.
Yeah.
So,
have there been any since? Do we know?
I don't
Let's
know.
see. I'll look it up.
This is probably a dumb statement, but I'm gonna.
I think it was just her.
Nitro, please stop. There's this like little dog making little growling noises that he can hear, and he decides he needs to protect this house. Like, we're fine. So
it was just her, I believe, on The Real World.
Okay, do you remember? I don't know if his name is Chet. I might be making his name up.
No, the guy from Brooklyn?
On Sarah Rice's season, right?
Yeah. He's a monster person, by the way. Yes, he's like he's like alt-right crazy person right now, by the way.
I mean, okay, so I'm not far off in what I'm saying here.
No, you're not at all.
So yeah, he's if there hasn't been any other Mormons, he at least looks like the closest.
Looks like he could be one. Yeah, I mean, he's a garbage person.
Everything seemed to go through Julie in this season. And like you said, like, she is a dynamic character for what MTV could get because of not just being Mormon, but she was willing to like try new things and be open to people and like stuff like watching her now, it's like, oh shit, there's like a 21-year-old who's like still asking and saying these types of things. I think really in like 2000 that what she was asking and saying was actually probably seen as more progressive than we give her credit for at this moment, because she was willing, like, she wasn't Matt just was like, okay,
right, closed off. Yeah, she was open.
And again, I think like she really tried to live a life that she didn't get to before this, and so I can see why MTV put everything through her. Like, I do kind of salute in a way her willingness to like go out to a rave until 7 a.m. the weekend her parents are there and she has to like wake up for church, or to like take Danny in with open arms and like try to have the relation. Like, I know that she was like so happy about going and rapping with with Tokyo, which was like very cringeworthy. But like nonetheless, like I feel like she tried, which is more than some of the other housemates. Like, it's more than what Kelly can say. It's more than what Matt can say. Jamie tried in his own way, but like, and even like Tokyo didn't really try necessarily.
No, he was very closed off.
She was good for this show. She was good for it.
She was good for it. And I think she's a big reason why the show was as popular as it was, because it almost felt like we were looking at the world and at the roommates through Julie's eyes. And it's like almost like, and I don't mean this in a rude way, the eyes of like a child in a way, because like she's like this sheltered girl coming from this area in Wisconsin where she had no exposure to anything else that the world had to offer other than what was like immediately in front of her. And she was obviously very sheltered because she was part of the Mormon religion. So her parents obviously kept her very closed off to a lot of things. And so did her school. And then she comes to New Orleans, which is a very cultural place. It has different races, it has different people of different sexual orientations. It has, all of these things that she's never been exposed to. And she's not afraid to ask a lot of questions to learn. Some of the questions I think are probably inappropriate, or just like, but she's unapologetic about it, and we're lucky that we had a Danny and a Melissa to kind of like, who were accepting of her and didn't take it in a way that it could have been taken. And wanted to kind of like explain to her like why you can't say certain things and why you're not allowed to say the N-word as a white person and why being gay is okay and all these other things. And I feel like it's kind of disappointing to hear the direction that she went after the show, because I think this could have given her a really good opportunity to grow as a person. And it seems like she just didn't, and just let probably the fame and the ego get to her head, and just ended up becoming a garbage person.
Yeah. I think that during the season, Julie meant very little with malintent. I think that everything, if anything like negative, if something she did was perceived as negative, it was out of ignorance. It wasn't out of like, she wasn't being malicious. And you bring up a great point of like, as viewers, we kind of got to see things through Julie's lens, which I think almost was probably necessary in 2000, because it's like you have someone in real life who is doing this experience and learning these things, experiencing people entirely different from her, and is like doing it in a very open way and genuine way as well. That getting to live it through her versus just being told it, I think makes it a little bit more impactful for the viewer of like, oh shit, like my thought process on this concept was similar to Julie's, and now seeing her 6 episodes later saying things to Danny like, I've met you and you're such like a beautiful person, and I've learned so much about like homosexuality that like how could someone, like, oh, okay, like, and you get to kind of view the progression. That I think it was a very intelligent choice by MTV to,
I think so too,
to give us the season in that perspective, which made her a main character. It just like you said, it sucks that post this season, her actions now put her in such a negative light. And I mean, 1/3 of her castmates wanted nothing to do with her after like 2 years of the show ending. You know what I mean? Like they, because of her actions or people in her actions, depending on who you ask or whatever. And again, we saw her try to murder Veronica on the challenge. So
and I think a lot. So it sounds like some of the things that I read on Melissa's blog from a long time ago referenced other people from the real world who really wanted nothing to do with Julie. I think coming out of the show, first of all, her agent at the time, who supposedly wrote these emails, was her mother. So I think that's a really important clarification to make. Yes, her agent was her mother. So her mother was going around sending these emails about these cast members, if it wasn't Julie herself. So it's not just hired help, it's her mother.
And so then she calls her mom in the first homecoming episode. And she's calling her a former agent at the same. Oh, that is rich. That is fucking rich. That like adds a whole new perspective to this whole dynamic.
Yes. So that's an important part of it. She also screwed Coral out of a lot of money. A lot of people said, a lot of really negative things about Julie. So I think what happened with Julie after the show is really unfortunate, because she came into the show as a very naive young girl, and it feels like coming out of it on the other end, she ended up becoming probably the worst version of herself, and seems to have continued that way based on what we're seeing from the first episode of Homecoming, where she just capitalized on the opportunity to be like this good Mormon girl, threw everybody else against, up against the bus. I'm just reading this comment from Fuel Caution, so it took me by surprise. Okay. We'll keep it moving. So yeah, and aside from that, I think she did the worst that she would that we saw, that we could have seen from her. Like, whereas she could have come out and been an advocate for LGBTQ community, for Mormons, to learn more about other races and to open your eyes to all these different cultures in the world. She kind of did the opposite of that, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. I would love if someone put together like one of those one-offs. You know how we got one about like Erica Jane and like her court case and shit. Like someone give me Julie's post real world career, like an overview of it for like the 5-ish years after. Like give me someone summarize that in one Hulu video for me, please.
I would love that too. I would love a deep dive.
Yeah. Maybe we can do that, and that's where we'll make our money.
Yeah,
So,
maybe.
If Jamie can produce a public access TV show, we can produce
Absolutely.
a Hulu documentary. Like,
Absolutely.
I'm confident in our abilities.
Me too. We can do it.
Intelligent women.
Yeah, we got this. We got this.
All right. Well, I mean, there's so much to talk about with Julie that it's almost like overwhelming in a way because, like we said, she's involved in so much.
I agree.
So some main storylines for Julie, in my opinion, are her being like very sexual for being someone who like is only going to like kiss people. She had a crush on Matt on and off throughout the season. She did like make out with Jamie at one point.
She had a lot of like random dates.
Yeah.
Like that young guy, and then there was another guy that she met. So yeah, she definitely seemed like she was like getting out some of her pent up sexual tension in the house. Like she used it as an opportunity to really let loose.
We also see her just like trying things that I don't think if you say like, oh, like Julie's Mormon, and then the next sentence is Julie went to or Julie did. It's a lot of things I don't think that many people expect, like the drag show, the rave, I don't know, even like mud wrestling a dude in in like a sports bra and shorts or whatever. Like she was quite adventurous in terms of what she would do.
Boxing. Did we talk about boxing?
Oh yeah, she got the shit kicked out of her by a girl named Squirrel.
Yes.
If someone's gonna fight me, please let it be a girl named Squirrel.
Yeah, and that girl did not hold back against Julie. She got her ass handed to her.
I also think that, and this came up once with Melissa, but it relates to the squirrel situation as well as many other situations, is I think that some of the people who they were around were very cognizant of the fact of like, oh, I'm going to be on MTV if I'm Baxter going on this date with Julie or whatever, and like if I'm Squirrel challenging Julie to box, like that guy who took Melissa out on a couple of dates.
I was going to say that too.
Yeah.
That was a theme throughout the real world, especially in the later seasons after like the internet was more of a thing. People would like harass them if they would go out to bars and stuff. Like I think we saw people get into like fight. Didn't CT get into a fight with someone in Paris or for being on the show? I mean, it's CT, but
CT probably tried to fight me once,
Yeah, it's true, especially back then. But there are a lot of things that happen in the later seasons because the people are in the real world and people antagonize them.
Yeah, and I think that like I don't know if Julie ends up in a boxing match with a girl named Squirrel if she's just choosing to spend
random girl
5 months in New Orleans as like a let me explore outside of the world of Mormonism. So I do think that, like, I just wanted to put that out there as kind of like an overarching thing with this series. Yeah, she also kind of like helped Jamie with the spirituality thing. Like she was still going to church every Sunday. I think as frustrating as Julie was to watch and like what we know about her after the season, this is a completely different experience without Julie.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm not a Julie fan by any means, and I wasn't back then either. But I agree is that she was like a necessary vehicle for the show to kind of move the story along.
Hmm.
And I agree that like she was almost like the narrator of the show in a way. Um, even though the show didn't really have like they were all acted as narrators, she was almost like the main narrator. And a lot of the teaching moments that we got on the show were driven by Julie's ignorance
Hmm.
on a lot of topics. And I think that, there's specifically a scene where she's like crying in bed because she's saying that like it's not fair that she's not taught a lot of these things in school. And she's thinking about all these other people like who aren't learning kind of the ways of the world. Like she literally only knows like a very small sliver of the world around her when she comes into this show. David says something in the episode where we're talking a lot about race, that there's like millions of black people in the world, and Julie has met not one. And it's true. I mean, she
Hmm.
she hasn't. She tells Melissa that she would cross the street if a black
Yeah.
person was walking toward her. And the fact that she feels comfortable enough to say this is interesting because she's really vocalizing the way that a lot of people who are inherently racist or brought up to be racist or live in sheltered communities feel, but she's actually saying the part that you're not supposed to say out loud. She's saying that. And I think that brought out a lot of these teaching moments that we likely wouldn't have seen otherwise. But it's also like, how much of it can we say is okay because she was just born in this state of ignorance versus like, when does it become time to like not use as an excuse anymore?
Hmm.
And she's, Melissa, she says to Melissa in that same episode, like, is it someone's fault that they just don't know? And that's a question that I think comes up a lot of like, when does it become your fault that you don't know? And is it always your fault that you don't know? You know what I mean? Like, I think, and that goes for everything, not only race but like other things, like
Yeah.
just the actuality of the world around you. Like, what's going on in other countries? What's going on in the news? What's going, like, is it your fault that you don't know? Sometimes, like, I think, yes, I usually think, yes, it is your fault that you don't know, because especially now, with the access to the information that we have.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think it's just it's an interesting thing that she brought up. And it's just an interesting theme throughout the season that really carries us through.
Yeah, I think I mean, especially for something like the Mormon church, which like you could call the Mormon cult if you really wanted to. I feel like even more so with her, it's there needs to be some leeway in the year 2000. I think now it's a little bit more difficult to provide as much leeway for, especially even like going to BYU. I don't know if you follow like the Black Menaces on TikTok. They are
No.
Oh my god, I love this shit.
I'm not like deep into TikTok. That's my blind spot.
Basically, it's like a group of 4 or 5 Black students at BYU, and they go around asking people, mostly students, but there's some family that's visiting or professors or whatever, and it'll be the same question for the entire TikTok of like, what do you think about Black Lives Matter? Or like, what do you do you think that gay people should be able to get married? Like, would you ever date someone who's trans? And asking these BYU students, and it's just like crazy to see their responses.
But they're students themselves of BYU as well?
Yeah. So
I'm surprised that they don't get kicked out. Based on what we see of what BYU is on this show. Maybe things have changed.
That's the thing is like, no matter what the answer is, like someone could give the most like racist or problematic or ignorant answer, whatever. It's crazy to me because these like 20-something, like 19 to 20-something year old kids are just like, okay, cool, period. And then just like keep it moving. Like it doesn't matter what they don't react to it, which is like kind of crazy to me.
Yeah.
Not in like a negative way, just the fact that they're
the fact that they have that restraint. Yeah.
But yeah, so many of these kids like at BYU are like, I'd have to like research it more, and I don't know if I like know enough to have an opinion. And the honor code says that we're not supposed to, and we signed the honor code, and
oh my god,
like it's definitely worth just doing like a scroll through of. It's so interesting, and so as I'm watching like this 2000s version of the real world and thinking about what I'm seeing on TikTok of present day students, like, okay, there's been a little bit of progression, but also there's still a lot of them who are Julie in
Yeah.
2022. And I'm a big believer that we're a product of our environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Up until a point
A
when
certain
you
point.
are
Yeah.
allowed to start controlling your environment.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, to what Melissa said, at what point is it her responsibility to know? And like, I would say post the real world, and that at that point, Julie had more than enough experience to realize, like, okay, my thoughts on everything might be very skewed. And again, it just sucks to see like the route that Julie took.
Yeah, it's really, really, really unfortunate, especially watching these so close together. Like you see Julie trying to make these changes in her life and learn. And then, we watch the first episode of Homecoming and we see that she's not only not learned, but it seems like regressed into this like former self that she had when she first went on the show. And to like feign this ignorance of like why it's not okay to say these things about Danny and Melissa and the implications of doing things like this to people of color or someone in the LGBTQ community. It just feels like there's no excuse for her not to know that, especially based on like everything that she talked about on the show. And then for Tokyo to just sit down and like be able to say these things to her and she'll be like, oh, I never thought about it that way. It's like, that's on you that you never thought about it that way. And like Tokyo even having the grace to sit down and have that conversation with her is like beyond what is expected and like should be expected. And it's not, that's not his job to do that.
And I mean, I personally think this is a great time to transition into 2000 Tokyo.
Yeah, let's do it.
Like, do you have anything else you want to say about Julie?
No, I don't have anything else to say about Julie. We could talk about her family, but I don't even feel like there's really anything there to say that we
there's
haven't
like
said
nothing
already.
surprising about how her family was, like, at all.
Yeah. So I'll read the bio. The bio here on Wikipedia lists him as David Broom. As we know, he goes by Tokyo now, so that's why we were referring to him as Tokyo. We talked about it at the top of the show. He was 22 when he went into the house, and he's from Chicago, Illinois. So I'm going to just switch and say Tokyo here. But Tokyo is an African-American singer who works out every day, does not drink or smoke, and has a 4.0 grade point average, and aspires to be the first Black president of the United States. I didn't know this. A mindset he achieved after bouncing back from the heartbreak of a breakup with the girl of his dreams. I didn't know any of that. MTV describes him as a superbly talented musician and a deeply entertaining person and a sweet, vulnerable guy trying to run as far away as possible from Chicago ghetto he grew up in and the legacy of his preacher father's departure from the family. These are all in quotes from MTV. He has several sexual partners during the course of the season. He avoids conflict with his housemates, dismissing them when they attempt to resolve issues with him. During the season, he performs a rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner at a sporting event attended by his housemates, which brings Melissa to tears. In 2003, he performed his original song, Come and Be My Baby Tonight, on the 6th episode of the first season of the Comedy Central sketch comedy TV series Chappelle Show. So that's Tokyo, according to this Wikipedia article with quotes from MTV.
I just want to know, like, who wrote each of these?
I don't know. Like these to me, I'm kind of glad we're reading them, but these don't encompass like who these people are at all to me.
I mean, Kelly's is like legit a sentence, and then we just got a whole ton of information about Tokyo that like I'm not even sure, when did he say that he aspires to be the first Black president?
I never heard, like, I'm like, did I miss that?
I don't remember it.
Maybe that was in his MTV bio at the time or something like that on the website. I don't know.
Wikipedia is wild out right now. Like,
I don't really know. Okay. So let's get into Tokyo. Tokyo actually enters the house with Julie, and they seem to hit it off really early on because they both share similarities in being musicians. I would say more so Tokyo is a musician than Julie, but no shade, I guess. What are your initial thoughts on Tokyo?
It's hard to even remember initially with him because I feel like the perception on him gets skewed very quickly. And I mean, if you were to go like based off of like body type and it's like, oh, here we go, like here's a dude who is going to tell you like how much he's benching and like how many girls he's had sex with and stuff, which like it really isn't like that far off, but to just leave him at that generalization is like a huge disservice to him as a person. But I also think that he kind of wanted to be seen as just that so he didn't have to worry about people getting close enough to
Mhm.
know about all those deeper things. I think of those like that stupid iceberg like training picture you see, like it's like for like diversity things where it's like the tip of the iceberg and then
Oh yeah.
underneath, like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just feel like Tokyo is that training picture of like he wanted everyone to just see the tip of the iceberg because he was afraid of people getting close and getting to know like the deeper Tokyo, and also then having to like deal with himself the deeper Tokyo. I think he was kind of like hesitant in terms of like unleashing that to the world.
I totally completely agree with you. And I think, I think he was hiding behind that persona, right? And he did a lot with like he would bring in strippers and he had like a party with strippers in the hot tub and like everybody was like, why is he acting like this? Like we want to get to know the deeper him and he's just resistant. And I don't think it was necessarily about the roommates. I think it was more so him and he wasn't ready to show that side of himself. And I think a lot of it was like hiding behind that like his body and all of that. Like I think that really was where he was fueling a lot of his energy so he wouldn't have to like put his energy into anything that he was not comfortable with at the time dealing with. He's a very complex person. And he's the person I think I'm the most excited to see on Homecoming, because I just want to get to know him a little bit better and it seems like he's much more open to that now.
uh I'm gonna jump straight to my like I don't know if it's my favorite. Maybe it's like the most entertaining Tokyo moment for me, which was when it was his turn to produce the
Yes.
the
Yes.
show.
My
And
favorite. Yes.
he is so basically he decides that he's gonna do like a fashion show and he's gonna get all these models to come in and show different design wear, which actually was him like asking five of like his women
Yes.
friends that he had met in New Orleans to get five other friends
It
and
was like
show
a
up.
pyramid scheme.
It was and like bring your bathing suits. You're gonna like walk around in your bathing suit, and so this is actually the most entertaining part of it for me is because there are people like some of the roommates are very not happy about this. Like, why is
Mhm.
there only women models? Why aren't there men? And so,
Yeah. Specifically Julie.
yeah, and so he keeps saying like there's gonna be men and women models, and then like the day of the show, he's like, I'm the only male model actually.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he just like comes out with like the curved hat, which that like the way you got that curved hat is you fold it up and then you like tucked it into the backside, but if it wasn't, then you had to like curl it and like put it in a cup. Like it was so the brim was so curled, and his like very long shorts were just like shirtless and like
Yep.
arms extended when he was like, yeah, there's definitely gonna be like male and female models, and he was the only male one. I'm just like, that was like him to a T for me in terms of like what he allowed other people to experience of
Yeah.
him on the show, of just like I'm the focal point of me and everyone else around me. Like if you aren't going to be benefiting my focal point of me, then like get the fuck out. And so I
Yep.
felt like that fashion show was like a very good representation of that. But I was just so amused when he's like, oh, by the way, there's no other male model, it's just me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I actually found Tokyo very entertaining. I think he was actually a really funny person. Like a lot of the things he said really made me laugh. But yeah, that was a moment for sure. And I think even like during the Come On Be My Baby Tonight saga of like everybody giving themselves like a bio for the Real Seven, and he just made that video of Come On Be My Baby Tonight, which like what a freaking cultural moment Come On Be My Baby Tonight is. I mean, like it really, really is. And the slow mode version that's in the trailer for Homecoming is just like it's incredible. But even that, it just kind of shows that he like wasn't comfortable being vulnerable to show people who he really was. To have to make a video where they were saying like he's standing by cars that aren't his, he's like doing all this stuff, and it's like this isn't him. It just obviously there was something there that he was not comfortable showing. And I think toward the end, when they had the house meeting in the last couple of episodes, where Jamie is like, why are you an asshole, basically that's what this meeting is about. He kind of like has a little bit of like a I don't want to say a breakdown because he wasn't like breaking down, but he,
Mhm.
you know, he got emotional and he talked about like things with his mom. And, you know, from that on, it felt like he decided to be more open. And I think that's when Melissa in the airport at the end was like, this is bittersweet because like we've only gotten 3 weeks to really get to know each other, because he was just so closed off the entire time.
And he even took it well in terms of like reflecting upon it when they went
Yeah.
to they were in Subway, and he was like, yeah, like, was it harsh? Yes, but necessary. And quite frankly, I don't think I would have received it if it had been said any other way.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just so much to him that he like didn't let people see.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, I think we're gonna get to see a lot of it on Homecoming, which is like super exciting. I don't know if you noticed that I put this in the tweet, but I said David instead of Tokyo, and like as David would say, woo woo.
I love woo woo. I just want to say woo woo all the time. It's just like I just love it. I love it.
I did appreciate like the roommates impersonations of him
Going
when
like
they're
woo
like
woo. Yeah.
or like yeah, when they're
Yeah.
frustrated, they're like, and there's David being like, oh, I'm just gonna like go play my music and go see some strippers. Woo woo.
Yeah. I want us to get some woo woo from Tokyo in Homecoming. Like I hope that he carried woo woo throughout his life because it was just, I just love woo woo so much. I just love it.
Yeah, that definitely humored me. More so the roommates impersonations of the woo wooing,
Yeah.
and then like picking up on the woo wooing myself.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that he is so complex. I mean, I mentioned it in Homecoming, I think, but or when we did our Homecoming episode, that I thought Matt had a really good point about him, is that he is not only an only child, but also like his parents were divorced. So for
Mm-hmm.
what, he's 22, so like the last 8 years, really the only person he has to like have genuine conversations and conflict resolution with is his mom.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the person that clearly he like loves and respects the most.
Mm-hmm.
So there probably wasn't a ton of that. So then
Right.
to like be removed from just really needing to like care about one person outside of yourself, to being in a house with entirely different people and not having like siblings to have the
Yeah.
you know, typical sibling fights with or whatever, um is an entirely different experience for him. And
Yep.
it add on to the fact that he's the only black male in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just a lot of things that are different for him in that moment than, and not in a moment, just that whole experience than he's
Yeah.
experienced for the last 22 years. So I think he has to take on a lot in addition to trying to figure out how to show himself to everyone. And he didn't do that well, I don't think. But it also added an interesting dynamic to the show.
Yeah.
To see like the roommates try to navigate having a relationship with him, and especially that like come to Jesus moment of
Mm-hmm.
stop being an asshole, and how it did resonate and he did try more, and him showing up from his art show and everything. That it sucks we couldn't have gotten a few more episodes or even like weeks with him being that way, but I
Yeah.
do think we've really geared up for probably the most dynamic change in a person.
I think so too.
All the roommates is going to be Tokyo.
And you can even tell just by looking at him that he isn't this like huge bulked up dude anymore. It's the hope for me is that he let a lot of those walls down. And I think we saw it already in the first episode. Like I think we saw he came into the house with a little bit of anxiety and he said as soon as, you know, Kelly gave him that big hug, the anxiety kind of like washed away. And I really, really hope that he kind of like takes this as the opportunity. And it seems like he's very open to that. Like he's done the work in his life, I think, to open himself up to people. But yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think there was a point in the show where he said something along the lines of like, the roommates don't want me there. And like, I, you know, whatever. And it's just like, I think he did that to himself in a way. But I think he did it because he was protecting himself from having to be vulnerable and potentially getting into scenarios with the roommates that maybe he wasn't prepared for in a lot of different ways. So, but I thought he was a great cast member of this show, and it wouldn't have been the same without him, even though he didn't make a lot of personal connections. Like I really liked watching him. And you know, he was at his best, I think, when he was having these relationships with the different cast members. Like when he went to Melissa's art show. Like that really meant so much to her. And when he took Julie to the studio, that was like very cringe from Julie, but that was like very sweet that he opened himself up to her in that way. Like this is a personal thing for him. And he was like willing to bring her there. So I really like that. The other thing that I want to mention is South Africa. When they went to South Africa, he really kept to himself for a lot of that trip. But you could tell that that was really emotional for him. And he met one of the kids when they went to go visit. I don't know exactly where they were when they went to visit, but they went to go visit a bunch of kids, and he gave away a doll that I guess he was mentoring a younger boy in Chicago. And the boy, did the boy pass away?
I think so.
Yeah, I don't know if he ever like explicitly said that, but that's what it seemed like happened. I think maybe, yeah, maybe he did say it. And he gave the doll away, and he's like, those memories will live with me forever, and I want to like give this to this kid. And it was just so like you could really tell that he's like a very deep person and who's probably been through a lot in his life and just like feels very guarded because of a lot of that. So I'm really, really happy that he agreed to come back and do Homecoming, because I think we'll really get to see the more depth. Like it's very obvious that he has a ton of depth, and I think we're gonna get to see it on Homecoming.
So I had watched the Homecoming episode while I still had like 4 episodes left to watch of this season, and the way that he came into the house just being like so concerned of like, will people want to see me or whatever, I thought that like maybe some shit went down in those last 4 episodes, and that like he left the house like when the season was up, and that was it in like a hostile way, not in so much like it's also probably a little bit harder to keep in touch in 2002 versus how like let me follow you on Instagram now or whatever. So I thought that there might have been more of like a volatile ending to his time in New Orleans. And so now having seen the last 4 episodes, I'm kind of shocked that he came in with like so much nervousness and it seems like anxiousness towards the situation, because you could tell that people really cared about him in the season. They just wanted to get to know him, and it was more so his like his doing that he stopped that from happening. But like I was glad to see that all it took was like one hug, and he knew like, okay, this is gonna be fine. And I was also like glad to see that shit didn't go down at the end of the season with him, and if anything, like it got better for him near the end. Yeah. So it was definitely like interesting watching those 4 episodes after watching the first Homecoming season or first Homecoming episode and his like entrance into the house.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I'm excited to see what we get from him. And what comes of the relationships. And what I hope comes from Homecoming is that like everybody stays in touch. I know this is like a very like it's not a storybook ending, but like I want them to reconnect and be friends, because this cast is so dynamic. Like we can leave Julie out. She doesn't need to, but like everybody else, I would love to see them, like maybe Matt we can leave out too. But like the rest of them, I would love to see them like connect together and like remain, build the relationships back up and like maybe remain in each other's lives in the future. But maybe that's me just fantasizing.
That fan fiction.
Yeah, I'm writing real world fan fiction, real world Homecoming fan fiction, in addition to our Hulu documentary on Julie's life after the challenge, after the real world.
I just need all the information in one place. I just don't want to do a Google deep dive unless we're going to make it. Then like, okay, I'll do the Google deep dive for that. But
right.
Otherwise, like I want money to do that.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, Kari, do we have anything else? I feel like we covered off on pretty much the main themes of everybody on the cast so far. I don't feel like we missed anything glaring, but is there anything else you wanted to bring up from the original season? Anything we may have left out?
No, I think we did like a good job of covering a lot of the events that happened. But I don't think it's going to be the events that people need to know to watch Homecoming and get an understanding of.
Agreed.
Having these 7 people back in a house together for 2 weeks, as much as it is the relationships and dynamics of those relationships, which we talked about extensively, and understanding like why Melissa didn't want to like hug Julie when Julie came in. And why Danny was like, no, you need to talk to me later and all this stuff, and why Tokyo was nervous, and how Jamie more or less like hasn't changed and all this. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I think that's more what people need to know to go into the Homecoming season and feel like, oh, I understand why this is currently being brought up.
Exactly. And I think you're absolutely right. It's really about the dynamics of the relationships in the show. And I'm very, very interested to see kind of like what these incoming messages are going to be that they focus on throughout. But in the past seasons of the show, they really they do a good job of like unearthing some of the themes of the past, and have, some tough conversations, but some needed conversations. So I'm excited to see where we go. I wish it was more than 8 episodes.
Yeah, same. And I just want to give like a quick shout out to Valencia for just like
Yes, shout out
listening along
Valencia.
the whole time and saying nice things about us. So, Valencia, you're our MVP of the episode. Thank
Yes, thank you, Valencia, for joining us and for your feedback and your interaction. We really appreciate it.
Yes, we love knowing that like it's not just us talking to us.
Yes,
We were so
exactly.
excited. We're like, we have 100 views on YouTube from our
I
first
know, we felt like
episode. We're
celebrities.
like,
We did.
I told Katie I'm gonna start autographing pictures of
Mhm.
me for fans. I won't do that. I don't even know if I like would have a suitable picture for something like that. I hate pictures.
No, me neither.
Yeah, I am so excited for the next episode of this. Wednesday night should be great, and we'll be back
Yes.
talking about the current episode.
Mhm.
We will be likely bringing in some guests from time to time because I think
Yeah.
that we're in the age range of people who like are really happy that this is on and happening. So we'll bring in some different perspectives
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be great. And yeah, no, you covered it. Carrie, if there's
Yes,
nothing else, where can everyone find you?
I am KGD26 on Twitter, which, if you just listened to us previously, I'm currently tweeting about not misusing the word gaslight because some of you are using gaslight when you mean lying, and I'm just
Yes.
sick of it. I'm over it. Stop trying to escalate the situation by using a much more intense verb than you need to. Anyway, that's me on Twitter. TikTok, I'm trying to post more. My last one was asking TikTok to unsubscribe me from Dead Dog TikTok because even recently, and by recently I mean a couple hours ago, Katie was like, "Hold on, I'll be right there." I'm like, "Don't worry, I'm just crying about a TikTok about a dead dog." I don't know how I got on this side of TikTok. So like, Katie, a thing with
Horrible.
TikTok is like ending up on a certain side. So like I'm on like
Yeah.
teacher TikTok, I'm on teacher quit TikTok, dog TikTok, but somehow I've ended up on like dead dog TikTok more than I want to.
That's horrible.
And yeah, because I have the same fucking reaction every single time, which is like I start crying and then I go to whatever corner of my room Nitro is sleeping in and I like
And then give him a
squeeze
little
the shit
hug.
out of him and I make him
Oh,
promise me that he's not gonna die before I die. And I think I'm sick of my nights being ruined. The vibes get ruined by dead dog TikTok. So like I just want to be removed. So and anyway, the most important place you can find me at KGD26 is on Venmo. So send me cash. Uh, I joked with Katie earlier. She was sending me money. I'm like, she's like, "Oh, what's your thing?" I'm like, KGD26, like my other stuff. And I'm like, "Oh, I should start plugging this to you
yeah. Hell
too." So
yeah.
yeah, I will put the money to something good, like probably my dinner. Hey Katie, where are you on the internet?
You can follow me anywhere that matters, which is just Twitter and Instagram, at Real Slim Katie. You'll find me there talking about all things reality TV, Survivor, Big Brother, some politics things if you kind of like that stuff, but I know nobody wants to talk about that. You can also find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Real Slim Katie with an underscore. Play a lot of like fun, cozy video games there and just hang and talk to the chat. So if you ever want to talk more about reality TV, it's always welcome. Talk about a lot of things there, not only reality TV, but a lot of that too. You can also find me throughout the world of silent podcasts. I also am doing coverage on Big Brother Canada. With Isaiah, Josiane, and Lance. The season's coming to a close. We're at the final five. It's been a wild freaking ride. So please feel free to come and check us out. We've had a lot of great guests. We're going to have more great guests. So definitely we'll find that in your silent podcast feed. And you can find me with Kari talking about all things Real Housewives on the Cool Water Show, also hosted by Silent Podcasts. We just recorded an episode earlier today. We've had a marathon day together. It's been great. And we talked all things Real Housewives of the OC and New Jersey. So you can check us out there. And you can send me money on Cash App at Real Slim Katie. I think my cash tag is Real Slim Katie. So may as well jump in. Why not?
uh, Here we are. I can't
Here we
even
are.
use the like I'm a poor teacher thing anymore, which was like anytime anyone asks me for money, I'm like, I'm fucking poor, I'm a teacher. Even though like I worked in like 2 districts where I made like decent money for teaching, but
Yeah.
I don't even like have that trope to go by anymore. Now it's just like I'm just being an asshole. Send me money. You
I
shut
just
me up.
followed your lead, so.
All right, I'll put this up here in case any of you are visual
Yes.
learners and are watching us. But
Yes. For anyone who wants to follow Silent Podcast, here we are. This is our social media. So you can find us on Twitch at Silent Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Silent_podcast. We are also on YouTube with Silent Podcast. So come check us out. You can also listen to us anywhere where you listen to your podcast. Just search Silent Podcasts. And all of our shows right now are in one feed. So we have really, really great coverage of a lot of stuff right now. Aside from Real Housewives and Big Brother Canada, we have some really great Survivor coverage. We have Top Chef coverage. We have some scripted TV coverage around like Saturday morning cartoons. So we have a ton of really great stuff out there. And if there's anything you ever want to hear, we're super open to feedback. So hit us up. And we'll definitely have somebody in our really, really talented roster of podcasters who will want to cover it. So check us out.
preach. But
All right.
we'll be back Wednesday.
We will be back Wednesday. We will see you then. If you're listening to us live, have a great rest of your Saturday. And if you're listening to us later, have a great weekend or week.
Rest of your life.
Rest of your
Whatever it
life,
is.
whenever, day, week, month, whatever you want to have a great one of it. And we'll see you on Wednesday.
All right. Adios.